Welcome to Lento English. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
One introduction. Imagine a very big and strong country. People in the world knew it well. Then, quite quickly, it was not there anymore. This was the Soviet Union. Its end was a very big event in history. This lesson will help us understand this big event. We will look at what the Soviet Union was and why it ended. We will try to see it clearly without saying if it was good or bad. It is important to learn about things that changed the world. The Soviet Union was a country in Eastern Europe and Asia for many years. It started with a special idea. This idea was called communism. People had a dream of a new society. In this dream, everyone would be equal. There would be no very rich people and no very poor people. Everyone would work together for the good of all. This country began after a big change in the country of Russia. This change happened in the year 1917. It was called the Russian Revolution. A new government came to power with the idea of communism. In the year 1922, the Soviet Union was officially formed. The first ideas were about making life better and fairer for working people. But over time, the country became very different from the first dream. The government became very strong and strict. It controlled almost everything. People did not have many freedoms. Life was often hard, and the country did not truly become a place of equality for everyone. The Soviet Union was one of the two most powerful countries in the world for a long time. It had a big effect on many other countries. The world was often divided because of its ideas and its power. Its existence shaped much of the last half of the 20th century. Understanding its end helps us understand the world today. This is the start of our story about how this big country ended. 2. The old big country. Life in the Soviet Union was different for many years. After the time of the revolution, one important leader was Joseph Stalin. He was very strong and made many people afraid with his strict rules. The state had big control over almost everything. If people did not agree with the government or the ideas of the Communist Party, there were often big problems for them. After Stalin died in the year 1953, a new leader came, Nikita Khrushchev. Under him, there were some changes. This time is sometimes called de-Stalinization. It meant the country was less strict in some ways than before. Many people who were in special camps were allowed to go home. It was a small relief for many. But the government still watched people closely. If you said something bad about the state or had ideas the party did not like, you could lose your job or be sent away. It was still a controlled society, but maybe with less fear than before. During these years, the Soviet Union was in a long rivalry with countries in the West, especially the United States of America. This was called the Cold War. Both sides built many weapons, like atomic bombs, and tried to be stronger than the other. There was also a competition in space. The USSR had important moments, like sending the first satellite, Sputnik, into space and later the first man, Yuri Gagarin. These events showed the world's Soviet power in science and rockets. The economy of the Soviet Union had periods of growth, especially in the 1950s and 1960s. Things seemed to get better for some people during this time. But later, in the 1970s and 1980s, the economy started to grow very slowly. It was a time of stagnation. The government planned all the work, decided what to make, and set prices for everything. This was a command economy. Sometimes this system was not very good at making the things people needed or wanted in the right amounts. There were often shortages of goods in shops, and people sometimes waited in long lines to buy simple things. Another important leader after Khrushchev was Leonid Brezhnev. Under his time, the problems in the economy became bigger. The country spent a lot of money on the military for the rivalry with the West. This made the economy even weaker. The system felt old and change was very slow. People lived their daily lives, going to work and living in their homes, but the big country was facing many difficulties that were not always easy to see from the outside. The state structure with the powerful Communist Party was in control, but inside, the economic and social problems were growing. This was the situation before big changes started to happen in the middle of the 1980s. 3. A new leader comes. In the early 1980s, the Soviet Union faced many serious problems. The economy was weak, and the lives of ordinary people were not improving. The country's leaders were old and did not seem able to make the big changes that were needed. After Leonid Brezhnev, who led for many years, 2 other leaders came to power, but they were also old and died soon after starting the job. It became very clear that the nation needed a new direction and new ideas from a different generation. In 1985, a new leader was chosen, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was quite different from the leaders who had come before him. He was younger, and importantly, he was the first Soviet leader who had been born after the Soviet Union was created in 1922. This meant he had grown up in a different time. Gorbachev understood that the Soviet Union had deep issues. The economy was in especially bad shape. It was run as a command economy, where the government in Moscow controlled almost everything. This central planning system was very inefficient. It often led to waste, shortages, and a lack of innovation. The government spent huge amounts of money on the military to compete with the United States, which was a massive cost for the economy. This meant less money was available for housing, health care, and consumer goods, making life harder for people compared to those in Western countries. The system itself seemed broken. Inefficiency was often rewarded with more resources rather than fixed. Mikhail Gorbachev was a strong believer in the ideas of communism. However, he saw that the way the Soviet Union was run was not working. He felt the country was being held back by its old, rigid system and the heavy expense of the arms race. He was convinced that major reforms were necessary. His vision was to make the Soviet Union more open, more efficient, and more democratic, but still within the communist system. He did not want to end the Soviet Union or abandon communism. Instead, he wanted to change them so they could survive and provide a better life for the people. He believed that without these changes, the entire system would slowly collapse. The feeling among many was that change was not just wanted, but essential. 4. New ideas begin. When Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union in 1985, he knew the country faced big problems. The economy was not growing, and the strict government control made everything slow and inefficient. People did not have many goods, and the country was falling behind the West. Gorbachev believed that the Soviet system needed major changes to survive and become stronger. His main goal was to reform communism, not to end it. He wanted to make the system work better for the people. To begin this process, Gorbachev brought new, younger people into important government jobs. These people were more open to new ideas and changes. He then introduced two very important policies. The first was called perestroika, a Russian word that means restructuring. This policy was aimed at fixing the economy. The old way, where the government in Moscow planned everything for all businesses, did not work well. Perestroika wanted to give more decision-making power to local factory managers and businesses. It also allowed some ideas from market economies, like letting businesses try to make a profit and respond to what people wanted to buy. The hope was that this would make businesses more efficient, produce more and better goods, and help the economy grow. The second major policy was called glasnost, which means openness or transparency. For many years, the Soviet government controlled all information very tightly. There was a lot of censorship. Glasnost aimed to change this. It gave people more freedom of speech and allowed the media, like newspapers and television, to report more openly. Hidden problems and past mistakes could now be discussed in public. The idea was that by being open and honest, the government could understand the problems better and find ways to fix them, and people would trust the government more. These new policies, perestroika and glasnost, were the first big steps of change. They started to have significant effects on Soviet society. With glasnost, people began to use their new freedoms to discuss everything. The media revealed many things that were previously unknown, including how difficult life was for some people and how far behind the Soviet Union was in some areas compared to Western countries. This increased public awareness and led to many more discussions about the country's problems and its future. These early changes brought a feeling of excitement and possibility, but also highlighted the scale of the challenges ahead. The introduction of perestroika and glasnost marked the beginning of a new, uncertain time in the Soviet Union. 5. More problems appear. Gorbachev's new plans, perestroika and glasnost, started to change the country. But these changes were difficult and brought new problems. Perestroika was the plan to change the economy. The country had a command economy where the government controlled everything. Perestroika wanted to move to a mixed economy, giving businesses more freedom. This change was very hard. The government stopped helping businesses that were not efficient. As a result, many businesses made fewer products or closed. This caused big problems for people's daily lives. There were not enough goods in the shops. People spent a lot of time waiting in long lines to buy food and other necessary things. The economy was not improving quickly. Instead, it faced disruption and shortages. The government's money situation also became difficult. It spent more money than it earned, leading to a large budget deficit. The economy was getting worse for many citizens. The old way of running the economy was failing, and the new way was not ready yet. Glasnost brought more openness and freedom. People could speak and write more freely than before. news and information that was hidden before now became known. People learned about problems from the country's past and also current issues. For example, they learned about the serious nuclear accident at Chernobyl, which happened in 1986. The government did not tell people about it for 2 weeks. This lack of transparency made people trust the government less. With more freedom, people used newspapers and public meetings to criticize the government openly. They compared their lives to people in other countries and saw they had fewer things and a lower living standard. The problems from perestroika and the freedom from glasnost created a difficult situation. The worsening economy and shortages made people unhappy. Glasnost allowed them to talk about this unhappiness and learn more about the government's mistakes and failures. Public awareness of these problems grew quickly. This mix of economic hardship and new freedom led to growing dissatisfaction among the population. People were not happy with how things were, and their living standards were getting worse, not better. More problems were appearing for the country and its leaders. 6. Countries ask for change. Changes happening inside the Soviet Union started to affect countries outside it. These were countries in Eastern Europe. They were close friends with the Soviet Union, sometimes called satellite states. Life in these countries was similar to the Soviet Union, with strong governments and less freedom. But now, people in these countries also wanted change. In Poland, there was a strong group of workers called Solidarity. They asked for more rights and freedom. The government in Poland started talking with Solidarity. In 1989, Poland had elections that were more free. People voted for non-communist leaders. This was a big, peaceful change. Hungary also started changing. The government decided to open its border with Austria. Before this, it was very difficult to cross the border from east to west. Opening this border made a hole in the line that divided Eastern and Western Europe. This line was sometimes called the Iron Curtain. Then, a very important event happened in Germany. The city of Berlin was divided by a wall. This Berlin Wall was a symbol of the division of Europe. In November 1989, the government in East Germany opened the wall. Thousands of people could cross freely for the first time in many years. People even started breaking parts of the wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a sign that the old system was ending. Other countries in Eastern Europe also saw big changes. In Czechoslovakia, people protested, and the government changed in a peaceful way. This was called the Velvet Revolution. Bulgaria also had reforms and moved towards more open politics. In Romania, the change was not peaceful. There was fighting, but the government changed there too. These changes were different from the past. Before, if a country in Eastern Europe tried to change too much, the Soviet Union would send its army to stop it. But this time, the Soviet Union did not send soldiers to stop these changes. This new policy from the Soviet leaders allowed these countries to choose their own path. These events in Eastern Europe showed that the Soviet Union's power over its neighbors was becoming weaker. The desire for more freedom and change was spreading. 7. One last plan. Inside the big country, people in different areas felt they were separate nations. This feeling of nationalism grew stronger. They wanted to be in charge of themselves. They wanted more freedom and control away from the central government in Moscow. This was a big change from the past, when Moscow controlled everything. One important event happened in March of 1990. The area called Lithuania said it was now an independent country. This was a big step and surprised many people. After Lithuania, other areas also started to ask for more power or even independence. Areas like Estonia and Latvia in the Baltic region, and Georgia and Moldova in other parts of the country all pushed for more sovereignty. They held elections where people voted for leaders who wanted less control from Moscow and more local power. Some areas even declared their goal was full independence. The leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, saw that the country was changing fast. He wanted to keep the different areas together, but in a new way, not like before with everything controlled from the center. He thought about a different kind of union, where the areas would be more independent but still work together. This idea was called the New Union Treaty. It was a plan to make the country a union of sovereign states. This treaty was planned to be signed in August of 1991. It was hoped this new structure would make the areas feel happy to stay together and not leave completely. To see what people thought about keeping the union, the government held a big vote in March of 1991. This vote was called an all-union referendum. People across the country were asked if they wanted to keep the Soviet Union as a new kind of union, a renewed federation of equal sovereign republics. This new union would guarantee rights and freedoms for everyone. Many people, more than 75% of those who voted in the areas that participated, said yes. They wanted to keep the union but changed. However, some areas that wanted full independence, like the Baltic states, Georgia, Armenia, and Moldova, did not take part in this vote. So the results were mixed. It showed that while many wanted a new union, some wanted to leave completely. At this time, new leaders were becoming important in the different areas. One of these was Boris Yeltsin. He was a strong voice for change, especially in Russia, the biggest part of the Union. He publicly disagreed with some of Gorbachev's ideas and wanted faster, bigger changes. In June of 1991, Russia had its first election for a president, and Boris Yeltsin won. His power grew, and this changed things even more for the future of the country. The old central power was getting weaker, and the power of leaders in the different areas was getting stronger. This made the situation very uncertain as the date for the new Union Treaty signing came closer. People wondered if the old big country could really stay together, even in a new form. 8. The story ends. After the plan for a new union, something unexpected happened. In August of 1991, some people in the government did not like the changes. They were hardliners. They tried to take power from Mikhail Gorbachev. This was called the August coup. They put Gorbachev under house arrest. They wanted to stop the reforms and keep the old system. But many people did not support this. People went into the streets to protest the coup. This happened in Moscow and other cities. People were brave. They stood against the tanks that the coup leaders sent. Boris Yeltsin, who was now the leader of Russia, was very important at this time. He stood on a tank and spoke to the people. He told them to resist the coup. The coup did not last long. After only 2 days, it failed. The army did not fully support the hardliners, and the people's resistance was strong. The failure of the coup had a big effect. It made the process of the country breaking up go much faster. Many parts of the big country were republics. After the coup failed, these republics quickly declared their independence. They said they were now new, separate countries. One after another, they made this decision. This happened in August, September, October, and December of 1991. With so many republics leaving, the big country could not stay together. In December of 1991, the leaders of some main republics met. They decided that the Soviet Union would officially end. On December the 26th, 1991, the country stopped existing. Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as leader on December the 25th. His job was finished because the country he led was gone. It was the end of a long time in history. New countries started to build their own futures. The story of the Soviet Union came to an end.